Okay, I've been in what we used to call the Stone Ages of multimedia 25, 30 years ago. And I remember seeing this survey in the paper, which basically surveyed 100 middle school kids, and when they asked them, like, where's Madagascar? And pretty much the answer was interesting, which is only 8% of them knew, although that went up when the movie Madagascar came out, but then it went back down. And then they also asked them, where is Yoshi's Island in Super Mario World? And then it was astonishing that, you know, 2/3 of them, of course, knew where that was. And I was thinking, you know, what's wrong with this picture, you know? And I think, to me, it was like we have a lot of exploration in these virtual worlds that don't have any sort of transferable knowledge into the real world. And I thought we need to figure out how to develop mental models that map to develop context for understanding. And so I started looking at a little bit of how the brain works. And it was interesting that there are different parts of the brain. Part of the brain that recognizes what something is different than the other part of the brain that recognizes where something is. And the brain sort of builds a mental map of connections between the different senses that you have. So to that end, I was thinking about, you know, how do I create an information architecture when we create these interactive experiences such that it can engage them, help them develop spatial and context, as well as form new ideas from the mental models that they come up with. So to me, the engagement experience starts at the very point of this experience pyramid with stories. And that's because I worked at the Voyager company doing Criterion, and I spent a lot of time with movie directors, and the story really became key to me, and I wanted to figure out how to bring story. I didn't even have to do anything. There must be some gestural to control. So that led me to this, how many of you have seen the movie, a short film called A Private Universe? It's a really interesting little film. They basically interviewed a number of Harvard graduates, and they asked them like, what causes the seasons? And of course, very confidently, they said, well, the reason why the seasons occur, like in the wintertime, the sun is actually further away from than the Earth. And in the summertime, the Earth is closer. But their mental model of basically how the seasons happen was completely wrong. And these guys went through 4 years of Harvard, so I'm not sure what happened there. Maybe they didn't take astronomy. But essentially, through exploration, that's how we can develop good contextual models. So I'm going to give you a sort of the first example that I put together. It's basically an early immersive product, which was called A Passion for Art, which is about the Barnes Foundation. And here I tried to make it very different than a lot of interactive programs were back then. It sort of started with narration and music. So essentially, this is the Barnes Foundation. If you've ever been there, it's just outside of Philadelphia. And when in elementary school, we had a poster of it about this big, and I was really shocked to find that the poster is actually the size of a gigantic wall. So in the course of this particular product, I wanted to convey scale and context and stories. So in here are excerpts from the tours that we couldn't hear, and you can go and look around in the gallery. Say you pick a particular Cézanne painting, and you want to go look at other works by Cézanne. You can go forward and say pick this particular work, which is a wonderful still life. But if you go to the gallery, it takes you where it's the room and wall where that particular painting is. So this process of exploring virtually in this museum, you're getting a sense of the scale, the location of these works. You're also getting the story of this work. If I also wanted to know more about these works here, there are a number of documents that were discovered in archive that most people didn't know about it. And things like checkbook stubs from Paul Guillaume about Matisse, Van Gogh, Picasso, etc., or other works here. This is an amazing letter from Joseph de Renoir, who talks about Renoir when he saw him in Paris and how his son, Jean, basically was badly injured, part of his bone is gone. So, you know, getting back to the idea of story and contextual exploration, this is sort of source reference information that adds a degree of detail and context to this. So let me exit out of this. And a second example is artmuseum.net, which was the Barnes Foundation, but done online. So where you could virtually explore over a DSL connection, this was a long time ago, and walk through the gallery and pull up letters and drawings, and you could see other people as avatars in that space as well. It's a sort of the same architecture of guided tours, which are the same guided tours that they had in the physical museum itself. And then back to television, I work with the Frontline team on Commanding Heights, which is a 6-hour series, but even in 6 hours, it's not enough time to really tell the story of globalization for the entire world. And so what we did is we deconstructed the show into 3 nights, and where we would be playing the video of the show, and then as the video was playing, you could see this online, there would be links that would be appearing that would tell you about what was happening in the world at that time. Say if it was 1929 in Germany and there's hyperinflation going on, you could see this time atlas. But then also, if you go forward to 1989, it would show you the fall of the Berlin Wall. So there's a way to sort of deconstructing the program with deep interactivity. And this particular program was only aired once, but it ended up being hugely popular because professors could deconstruct this program and use it to teach their students. Because if you search for the word hyperinflation, you're going to find every instance of hyperinflation in the program, in the interactive material, in exhibits, in interviews, and everything. It was amazingly comprehensive. So the information architecture for that particular product as well is very much like the Barnes Foundation, which the television programs were the story, a number of resources related to exploration, and then we had access to a lot of source information as well. We got a British Academy Award for that. And this takes me to the Worldwide Telescope, which is, this initially was my dream as a 5-year or 6-year-old, because I grew up in Los Angeles and I always wanted to see the Milky Way. And, you know, between smog and the city lights, that was never going to happen. So I thought my dream was to have a gigantic telescope, a Harvard astronomer, and a really dark sky. And of course, that never happened. But when I was at Microsoft, I went to our head of research and it says, you know, astronomy data is finally starting to be available. And maybe what we can do is bring it all together into one environment that's really easy to use. And so Worldwide Telescope is essentially that. It's a view of the sky like a browser, but it has like 85 different wavelengths of light. It has the highest resolution imagery from the Hubble Space Telescope and other space telescopes. It has connections to lots of rich data behind all these objects. But the best part of all is that it has an authoring environment that's very similar to if you can make a PowerPoint presentation. It's like PowerPoint in space. And so you can create these guided tours in Worldwide Telescope that are pretty amazing. Okay, I'll launch one of these guys.
Sorry. A nebula is what happens when a star like our sun dies. It lets out its remaining energy and expands, making lots of pretty pieces that one day can become planets. I think it's neat that stars can be so amazing for so long. I wonder what Vega will look like when it dies.
So I'm going to pause this for a second here. So this tour was created by him, Benjamin. He was 6 years old when he did it. And it's basically like making a PowerPoint presentation. Each one of these slides is a sort of a point in space, wherever you want to look at it. And then the next one, you go from sort of place to place. So you can see that he went all the way up to it here. So these tours are just paths in the 3D environment. And these paths can also have animation and graphics and music and a lot of other elements to it that look like video, even though they're not video.
Chris, what was the user base at any one time for World Wide Telescope?
It's over 10 million. I think the interesting thing is a lot of planetariums have adopted World Wide Telescope. The largest planetarium in the world is in Shanghai, and it just put in World Wide Telescope in the dome. And the reason why I think they're doing it, aside from it being free and open source, but it's also because the traditional like movies that they would present in the dome are sort of static entities, whereas this kind of thing, like a Worldwide Telescope tour, they can interact at any time. They can pause and engage with audiences with questions and go see things that they're interested in seeing. One example is the University of Washington had a digital planetarium, little star projector, and it used to be like $1 million, but nobody really used it much. And so they installed Worldwide Telescope in their dome. And so now graduate students create tours for the undergraduates to learn about astronomy. The undergraduates create tours, and they go out to middle schools and high schools and teach kids about astronomy with that too. So it's a really wonderful little tool.
All open source.
It's all open source, and if you look here, there's Oculus, or if you have full dome or whatever. So this imagery here, let me go pick some imagery that might be interesting to you. So we'll go look at Nebula, and so here's the Orion Nebula. It's kind of dark, but most of you know where the Orion Nebula. It's in the constellation of Orion, which has the 3 stars in the belt, and so we can zoom in and keep on zooming in. And so here's something that looks like a black grain of rice. But what this is actually, it's a solar system forming. So you're looking at a disk of dust that's in a plane that's spinning, and the glow is a star forming in the center of it. And then you can go and look over here, and you can see other examples of stars forming. This one here is edge on, you can see the star in the center of that. And then here's another one that's sort of like a teardrop. They're all pointing toward these really bright stars called the trapezium up above. And the energy of the radiation is condensing the dust and gas and hydrogen to make new stars. So this is just the imagery of what we have in Worldwide Telescope, but it's even much bigger than that. So if you look at the solar system, so here's our solar system. Let's see. You can see that there's a plane here, and then there's this one planet which is off at an angle, and it's actually the center is not at the center of it. So that is, of course, Pluto. And just by looking at the angle of where it is, it either came from, a direction from this way or that way when it was captured a long time ago. But we can go away from there, and now we're down in the lower right-hand corner. There's shows you the distance, very much like powers of 10. So we're at 1.5 light years, and if we keep on going, all of the stars start to go away, and then we exit the Milky Way, and then there's nothing for a long while, and then unfortunately, it's really bright out, but if you look here, you'll start to see some things that look like dots. So each one of these dots is a galaxy. And I can just bring up this finder here and pull up information about one of those million galaxies. So this shows you the spectra, the image of the galaxy. You can get more data about it. So the wonderful thing about Worldwide Telescope is it spans the range of kids doing things, astronomers here talking about astronomy to little kids, to the Institute of Physics, which is also has acquired Worldwide Telescope along with the American Astronomical Society. But I want to get back to my deck for a second and Okay, let's go here. So one of the few things about astronomy that gets taught in middle school is like the phases of the moon. So there's a group called Worldwide Telescope Ambassadors who are at Harvard, and they recruit people that know a lot about astronomy or were amateur astronomers, and they go to schools and use a Worldwide Telescope to teach it. This was a class where the sixth grade teacher was teaching about the phases of the moon. And I'm going to play a little video here, which is...
Whoa. Go, Clark. So did you all really enjoy using Worldwide Telescope?
Yeah!
Oh, yeah. What did you like most about it?
The blackboard.
What would you like to use it for in the springtime?
Finding
What would you like to do, Paul?
Find other planets.
Very good.
Find other.
What would you like to do?
Find more colliding galaxies.
More colliding galaxies.
Yeah, those are cool. Find more.
Alex?
I want to find more nebulas. Yeah, the Eagle Nebula.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd want to learn more about Pluto.
Learn more about other stars and constellations.
See more black holes and nebulas.
I want to learn more about the Mars rovers.
All of that's in here.
I want to have them be in 3D.
Oh, yeah.
3D. You wear 3D glasses.
Would you guys be interested in making tours?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing. Because the process of learning and then synthesizing and then creating their perspective and their understanding of it is a really wonderful thing.
Okay, so it says 55,
55.
So this is a program we did with
which is the last coordinate.
FAST,
Then
which
I'll
is
check
supported
out the
by
Worldwide
NSF.
Telescope on Professor
And,
Goodman's computer.
We have to go back and give the
Stop
coordinates to Professor
electromagnetic
Goodman.
spectrum.
Let's go back.
Let's do it.
They're so close to stopping gamma ray person. Only one more type of radiation to go. And
Anyway, basically, the kids are on a quest. They have different abilities. Some are like butterflies where they can see ultraviolet. Others are a different creature where they see an infrared, and they all come together to try and figure out who gamma ray person is. These are some quotes from kids. My favorite one is, "It gave me a better mental map of the universe. Amazing, amazing, cool, incredible, repeat 30 times." There's another one that's not on here, which is, "It's cooler than Call of Duty," which is like, oh, we win. So this is a research study on the phases of the moon, with kids using Worldwide Telescope for it. And there are two interesting conclusions. The first thing they did was memorization, and the results of getting the correct position of the moon and the phase together was essentially the same between people that used students who used Worldwide Telescope and those that didn't. But when they did use Worldwide Telescope to try and figure out whether the moon was in the right place, the students that almost twice as many were incorrect as those that used Worldwide Telescope, and twice as many were correct. And this was an even more revealing study as well, which is how interested were you interested in using a real telescope? And that was up 0.6. And the group without Worldwide Telescope, it was a negative 0.4. So across the board, having these kind of immersive explorations can demonstrate real understanding and synthesis in this kind of work. So Harvard and PBS and PBS Learning Media and NASA have come together to do a larger scale project on learning about immersive media and astronomy and its impact in elementary schools. So these are some of those projects. Later today, I'm going to show HoloLens in the other room, so you're welcome to come and try Galaxy Explorer or Holo Tour Rome. This guy here is the Astronomer Royale for the UK. His name is Martin Rees, and he loved HoloLens. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. So thank you.